of the Waynesboro City Council. And Ms. Anderson, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. To remind those in attendance this evening, if you've got something that you'd like to share with us, we've got a sign-in sheet in the back of the room, and we'd love for you to fill that out accordingly. First item on the agenda is to adopt the agenda. Do I have a motion to amend or adopt?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we amend the agenda to where we can discuss the vacancy in Ward A.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Oh, we've got a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, is there a motion to adopt the amended agenda?
I will make that motion.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Great, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Brings us to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right. Number 3B, I guess we'll call that, is the vacancy of Ward A, which would be Miss Anderson. So we are, so I've shared with a lot of folks, sad to see you go, Elzina. We'll save all the more big stuff as it approaches, but certainly have appreciated your service to the community.
Thank you.
So with that, I think there's a, counselors have a copy of the vacancy notice, and I think we're gonna work to get that published immediately and make those available. And I'll just go ahead and read that for the sake of those in the listening audience too. The Waynesboro City Council is seeking candidates to fill the unexpired term of Ward A Councilwoman Elzina Anderson. Ms. Anderson will end her term on February 29th. The unexpired term would run through June 30th. A qualified candidate must be eligible to vote in the city and reside in Ward A. A permanent replacement for Ms. Anderson's seat will presumably be determined in the May 5th City Council election. The next several months are especially busy for City Council as the body must consider and adopt a budget for the upcoming fiscal year. The council hopes to appoint a candidate with the enthusiasm for and commitment to the immediate task at hand. The council will consider especially helpful a demonstrated record of civic engagement and service to the community. And we ask that interested candidates should forward a letter of interest and resume of experience to Ms. Sportle, our clerk of council, by 2 p.m. on February the 28th, 2020. So with that, I think that satisfies the amended and more to come. All right. Next item on the agenda is our matters from council members. Anyone have anything they'd like to share this evening?
We would just like to remind everybody that the Unity in the Community event is going on the 29th of this month, and it starts at 11 a.m. It's happening at the Rosenwald Community Center. We're really excited. It seems like we have a long list of community partners, nonprofits that are community-focused coming out that day. We're going to have food, games. It's a free event, and we're hoping that the community shows up.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, looking forward to it. It's been a great, a lot of fun working side by side to get this committee with our partners at the Waynesboro NAACP to put this event together. And I know everybody on council is looking forward to it. So, anything else anybody would like to share? All right. Next is item 5 is to consider introducing an ordinance establishing a new section 1 of Article 1, Chapter 86 of the City Code related to the adjustment of utility bills. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, you may recall that at your last meeting that Mr. McCormick provided a briefing and an overview of this ordinance. Essentially, it is common for public water providers to establish guidelines for customer billing disputes and/or adjustments for excessive water consumption. In fact, the Virginia Code gives guidance in this area. It is the practice of the City of Waynesboro to provide leak adjustments on utility bills where the customer can demonstrate that there's been a leak on the customer side of the water meter and that leak has been repaired. We also have policies for rereading and testing water meters. However, these practices have not been codified, and it is the recommendation of the staff that the policies for billing disputes and bill adjustments would be codified according to this ordinance. I won't go into the detail that Mr. McCormick covered in your last meeting, but just a couple of reminders that the ordinance provides a method for applying for an adjustment, and currently there is a written form or application that's provided to the Public Works Director. And it should be noted that once that application is made, there still is a duty to pay at least a partial payment against the bill, and that's usually determined by the past common water use of the customer. Two, that the ordinance describes what a qualifying event is, and that would be leaks or even unexplained usage that exceeds the prior highest usage in a 24-month period of the customer by 200% and is also greater than 10,000 gallons. And obviously, if the customer has not had an account for 24 months, we would judge that on a lower peak monthly usage or lesser peak monthly usage. The ordinance provides provisions for rereading and testing meters that we reread a meter upon request. However, if there are more than one additional reread request within a 12-month period, then we would charge $35 for that reread. And then as well, that if we have to send a meter out for testing, that's sent to a third party. And if the meter is accurate, then it would be the responsibility of the customer to pay the fee that we pay the reading vendor. And then finally, the ordinance outlines the authorities and responsibilities of review and any type of billing adjustment, whether typically if the issue has to do with a meter or infrastructure generally, then that's the Public Works Director. If the issue has more to do with the creation and adjustments of bills, then that's the Finance Director. So at any rate, we've provided an ordinance for your consideration. We would recommend that you would introduce and discuss the ordinance this evening if it is your pleasure.
Great, thanks, Jim. Are there any questions for Mr. Shaw?
Mr. Shaw, did they give you a sense of how many episodes of leaks or how many times this has been used in the last year or two?
I don't have an exact number, Dr. Hostetter, but it is not an uncommon event. That it is, I would say, in almost every billing cycle, we have some challenge, whether that's just generally that somebody thinks their bill is too high or that there's a leak identified. So it's a fairly common event.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
I'll move to introduce.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 6 is to consider adopting a resolution approving amendments to an economic development performance agreement with KM Hotels LLC to fund construction of a public street in support of hotel and business development. Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, in November of 2016, the City Council and the Waynesboro Economic Development Authority entered into a performance agreement with KM Hotels to facilitate the construction of public street at Chickarell Lane in order to foster commercial development in the vicinity of Windy Grove Drive. And according to that original agreement, the city would construct a public road to be financed by KM Hotels, and over a period not to exceed 8 years, the city would then reimburse KM Hotels for the road construction cost up to $350,000 through a tax increment financing program, in other words, a rebate of real estate taxes above whatever the current tax value is. So whatever that increment of increase would be used to finance the road project. For its part, KM Hotels agreed to construct a mid-price 90-room hotel and promote other commercial development on its properties. They essentially own all but one property on Chickarell Lane at this time. In June of 2019, council authorized the city manager to execute an amendment to the original performance agreement extending the hotel completion date from January 1st of 2020 to January 1st of 2022. As road design and hotel site design have progressed, the city staff, the developer, and our respective design engineers have concluded that the project could be greatly simplified if the developer takes on the road construction project, presumably through a single contractor working on both the road project and the hotel site. Such an arrangement would require amendments to the existing performance agreement, specifically in regard to sections 3 and 4. And as I say, that basically outlined that the city would design the road, bid the road for construction, then manage a construction project, paying a vendor, and then seeking reimbursement. I think this would be, again, much simplified and probably would result in a cost savings for both the developer and the city. So the EDA, again, has acted on this, and we bring these amendments to the council for your consideration.
Okay. Well, thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Shaw? Okay, is there a motion to adopt the resolution?
I'll make that motion.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 7 is to consider approving an application from the Blue Ridge Classic Soapbox Derby organization to close a portion of Main Street and adjacent streets for the 2020 Soapbox Derby Classic on June the 13th. Mr. Hamp.
Mayor Short, members of council, this is the traditional soapbox event seeking road closures on Main Street and then adjacent roads or intersecting roads that cross at their points of cross with the race. It is the same closure plan that we've used in the past, and I would say that is one comment I see the applicant is here is that while the event enjoys broad community support and broad support in the downtown, I think to make the event as successful, mutually successful, both for the sponsors, the participants, and the host area, that communication remains active and reciprocal in that regard. So other than that, we recommend closure.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions? Is there a motion to approve the application?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And for the thrill of the hill. Good time. All right. And number 8 is to receive a departmental update from Mr. Luke Jude, Director of Planning.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. I don't know if, Mr. Hamp, if you want to say anything about why I'm speaking today, or...
Well, so,
Wonderful.
yeah, I'll go and I'll add that. So looking forward to it. What we've had at our retreat last fall, a conversation among council to find ways to create more community awareness of all the hard work that goes into each of our different departments, department heads, and the work that they do. Activities that are important to our communities to create and deepen and broaden transparency for the community, and just to create some excitement over how we invest our limited resources as a community. And so with that, Luke, I think, got the short straw to be here tonight. And with that, I would look to Mr. Hamp. Do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Not a word, sir. We can move right to
Okay.
Mr. Giudice.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. You see me a whole lot, so I'm not an unfamiliar face up at this podium, but I don't often get to explain on the larger picture of what we do. I don't think I drew the short straw. I think this was a short meeting agenda, and they knew I would talk the longest, the department heads. But the planning department is up on the second floor of this building, and before I talk about our mission statement, I just wanted to wax philosophical for about 5 minutes about sort of what planning is and why it's important. I'm going to start that off with a very philosophical question, which is just, what is a city? And I mean, there's a lot of different definitions that we could bring out, a lot of things that characterize the city of Waynesboro specifically, but I think the most simple explanation that a child could give you is just a city is a place where people live close together. And that means that it's a place where we share space, we live near each other, and our lives overlap with each other. I've been, for the last 14 years, since I left my parents' house, living in shared houses of various kinds with roommates, dorms, apartments, all different kinds of situations, except for very briefly recently when I bought a house and I got to live alone for the first time during that period. And so I've gotten to think about the benefits of living together versus living alone. The benefits of living together are we get to share space, share amenities, share infrastructure, a lot of things we couldn't afford on our own. Living alone was neat. I got a lot more individual control over my life. I also got to spend a lot more on my living situation, and also got to be have more privacy. But most of my experience has been living in group houses with other people. And I know that in those situations, it's a great, cheap way to live, and it's a lot of fun, but it brings its own problems. We get to interact with each other, we get to build wealth, we get to work together, we get to have a shared social life and identity, and like I said, we get to share things. It's a lot cheaper to live in a shared house because you all, 5 of you, pay for a kitchen, even if you each have your own bedroom, versus if you live by yourself and you have to pay for the entire apartment yourself. It's the same thing with the city. When you're in a rural area, you have a lot more privacy, you also have a lot more control over your whatever you do on your property. The more property that you have, the more control you have, because the less that your life is tied into your neighbors. But the closer you live together in a city, the more that you do have to engage in that kind of shared life. The problem with living together is that we have to engage in shared decisions, and we disagree strongly about how to live together. We don't just disagree. The problem's not just how to live together even though we disagree. It's how to live together even though we disagree about how to live together. Those decisions have to be made, and someone will always be unhappy. I got my first introduction to this in college, my first year when I was on student government, and the block cable controversy came up, and it was $260 a semester to get cable in your room. And so everybody, a lot of people, not that many people got it. And the cable company proposed that they would give us a block cable agreement where everyone would mandatorily get cable in their room and would only pay $40 a semester. So that was a great shared amenity we could take place in, but a lot of us didn't want cable at all and didn't want to pay anything for it. And that's the kind of controversy that we deal with in planning all the time, is that we have shared space, we have shared amenities. Sometimes we can save a whole lot of money and really improve quality of life for everybody by going in on something together. But then sometimes most people still don't want to benefit from that. And so we have to try to figure out what the best solution is for everyone. And in that situation, I didn't agree with the cable at all, so I didn't vote for it. Like I said, we benefit from shared amenities, we benefit from shared spaces, but also we have to make shared decisions. We have a system of private property in the United States that's a very effective but an imperfect tool. We can't perfectly delineate and assign property rights over everything. Streams flow between parcels. Pollution blows over property lines. You can see across the city, across multiple people's property. And we get into all kinds of disagreements because everything that we do when we live close together affects everybody else. And this definitely hits home in shared houses. You have to have disputes with people who have different ideas of cleanliness. I'm an extremely clean person, and I've lived with a lot of people who are not. And often we had disagreements about what the appropriate level of cleanliness for a shared space was. And you have to come to some kind of consensus about that. And they had to accept a little bit of compromise, and I had to accept a little bit of compromise. But we have to come to some kind of agreement about personal responsibility and the public good. So all of this is wrapped up in the discipline of planning. And so I was going to say about planning is a discipline that helps us to try to make good decisions about these shared spaces, these shared decisions. And we do that through kind of 3 main routes. One of them is a system of legal rights. We try to ensure autonomy for individuals. And oftentimes people come to us and say, well, why didn't you put the Walgreens over on the other corner? Or why didn't the road go there and not here? And often the answer is that we honestly don't have that much agency as a city. We have some agency over the whole territory, but there's a whole complex system of individual property owners' rights that gives every individual person a sphere of autonomy in which they can act, in which they can interact in a market. They all have roles and responsibilities, and so planning is being layered over that. It's different in other nations, in different systems, but in our system, we place a lot of emphasis on that decentralized decision-making power. And so we have to think in planning about people's individual rights and how we're interacting with those to try to route them all towards a common good. Another important element of making shared decisions is process. As you know, if you've ever shared a house with anyone, including especially probably a family member, when there is a decision that everyone has to make together, the biggest way to turn people off is not always even to vote them down, but it's to ensure that they're not heard, that they don't have a chance to participate in the discussion at all. And so a lot of the laws around planning are built around process, ensuring that notices are sent out, ensuring that legal ads are filed. Oftentimes when you see a subdivision come before you or you see a rezoning request, there's always been months of work ahead of time where the planning department is trying to think of every possible stakeholder who would be affected by this rezoning and contact them and ensure that even if maybe they're going to be affected negatively for something that's in the public good, and that's just kind of too bad at a certain level, that at least they have a chance to come to you and express their disagreements and ensure that they're heard. So we look for consensus, and we try to make reasonable accommodations. And consensus is always the first goal of collective decision-making. We always fall back on voting, and voting is what we have to do in the end. In the end, we have to say, are there 3 votes on council for this? And that's how a decision gets made. But before we do that, we always try to find something that everybody can agree on, especially in a small town. Because as you know, again, if you lived in a shared house, that people have long memories. And maybe you and your kids can outvote your wife, but that may not be the best solution for your future. But the third thing, key to making good decisions, is what the planning department is most concerned with, and that's vision, trying to have some kind of shared idea of what we're trying to achieve. When we do get into those disputes between individual rights and between the public good, when we get into those shared decisions about shared spaces, we want to have some kind of idea of where we want to head. And that requires an ongoing conversation between everyone. That requires facilitating meetings, bringing in input. That requires mapping out the landscape around us, what's going on in the national economy, what's going on in the regional economy. What is it that will best advance what most of our citizens are trying to achieve? So with that said, I was going to introduce you to the Planning Department's mission statement. The Planning Department enables Waynesboro citizens and leaders to make prudent long-term decisions that improve the well-being of the community and realize the city's vision. Now, this is sort of a crude drawing of the hierarchy here, that you all hire the city manager, he hires the Planning Department, we advise the Planning Commission, and then Planning Commission advises you all. So we do this through a number of ways. We do it in 5 ways. First, we help you to make prudent long-term decisions by leading this ongoing public conversation about the state of the city, its long-term vision, and the strategies for achieving it. And that results in the formulation of our planning documents. And we have a number of core planning documents, about the comprehensive plan, the transportation plan, the land use map, which shows our desired land use in each area. And those guide our decisions when we're reacting to things that are happening in the market or individual property owner situations. A number of things that we've achieved in recent years are the 2018 Comprehensive Plan, which many of you participated in or remember. And that was a great community-wide discussion involving hundreds of people throughout the city about where it is that we want to head, what the situation is in the city right now, and it resulted in a strategic planning document that gave us something of a direction. The 2018 Transportation Plan was also completed recently, and that was done in-house without the use of consultants, and that just lays out what transportation infrastructure we hope to improve in the future, what our goals are for that, and that can guide subdivisions. If there's a road shown on your transportation plan and then an area around it is subdivided, you can say, look, it needs to be subdivided in accordance with this vision for our transportation network. In the recent years, we also passed a major revision of the subdivision ordinance. This, I think, was a great advance for our subdivision ordinance. We were requiring a number of things that were considered fairly outdated, and we got a lot of that stuff cleaned up. Our zoning ordinance was revised in 2010, and I would say is still probably one of the best zoning ordinances in the valley, at least. I know Harrisonburg recently contacted us wanting to try to model after ours. I had a call from Bristol recently wanting to is trying to pass a large section of zoning ordinance modeled on ours. So that was excellent work that's still being kept up to date. We're also now experimenting with neighborhood planning, which is not something the city has really done a whole lot in the past, trying to engage in a planning process on a small scale with a neighborhood, and that can often be very personal, can result in a lot of discussions about the state of neighborhoods, their decline, their rising, what kinds of amenities are missing in those places. We're in the process of securing a consultant to lead a plan for the Port Republic Road area using some CDBG funds. We're also working on a land use plan in-house for the basic city area, which will try to address kind of the hodgepodge of uses that we have over there and try to develop some kind of vision for a number of the controversies that are brewing. And that's the goal of our plans, is when we have controversies brew about different properties, people have different ideas of what should go on, that's when we need to stop, come together and say, let's hash this out, decide what are we trying to achieve here. And that ensures that the market can work effectively to achieve that vision, because we can't work towards a vision if we're constantly reacting to each individual property owner and telling people, well, I don't know, maybe you could do that. We'll have to have a conversation about it. And then we have a big controversy and people get upset and argue and it's in the paper. Well, ideally, we want to have that conversation up front. And we want to have a vision that we can hand people and say, yes, that's in line with what we're trying to achieve, or no, that's not going to fly. The second way that we advance this mission is by advocating for the public in all land development and entitlement decisions. We apply the zoning and the subdivision ordinances in situations where administrative decisions are required. The Building and Zoning Department largely administers the zoning ordinance when there's a site plan. If there's somebody's going to build a building and it's already zoned by right, that'll go through the Building and Zoning Department. Subdivisions all go through the Planning Department. We administer the subdivision ordinance. And we also administer all processes that involve discretionary approval. Essentially, if the city has any discretion in the choice, then it'll come through the planning department, and we'll make that recommendation to you all and run that process. We try to run a clear, efficient, and fair review process that protects the public interest without unnecessarily deterring development or hampering the ability of citizens to make use of their property. And that includes, as I said, advocating for the public interest in major development decisions. Sometimes that means advocating against developers or property owners who want to get a lot of individual benefit for their property at the cost of everyone around them. And so we're trying to advocate for the public as a whole. Sometimes that means advocating for an individual property owner against objections of neighbors around them that when we're trying to weigh those, what's fair in that process. Some things that have happened recently, we've been processing, I believe, all development reviews quickly and efficiently. We haven't had anything that's dragged on, and we've made an emphasis recently on clarity and expectation setting to try to help people, especially who are new to the development process, to have a clear idea up front of what they're in for. We've had a major transition to EnerGov and our enterprise software. You all know all about the Munis transition. We've also gone through one. EnerGov is a Munis product that we use now for all of our land development projects. We handle hundreds of inquiries all the time about possible development ideas, and we're normally responding to those by saying that is or is not conducive to the vision that we've put together in the land use plan and the comprehensive plan, and trying to give people a reasonable idea of what will and won't work. That we always ensure that we inform everyone that they have a right to any kind of application that they want to put forward with or without staff support. You all don't generally see a lot of applications that don't have staff support simply because the margins really aren't high enough. Most people here, if they don't have staff support for a project, they're just going to let it go. But you know, as the possible profits go up, and as more politics gets involved and more attorneys get involved, sometimes they will try to push projects forward that maybe don't have staff support. We've also worked on making sure that our new developments are more efficient, interconnected, and safer for pedestrians, and that includes ensuring that they all have sidewalks, that they have access pathways, and that they have more efficient road layouts. There's a picture here on the right that shows something that we created this year, which is our community development flow chart. This has been received really well by the business community here, and that's just trying to put together a simple, succinct visualization of our process so that it starts off with a simple question: is the property already zoned and subdivided to allow your use by right? And then kind of tells them who they should talk to, and then do they need a subdivision? Do they need some kind of permit? Will they be disturbing this much land? Helping them understand exactly how many days it will take to process their application, who all is going to be involved in that review, and what kind of permits they're going to need. The third way that we try to advance this mission is by working with other departments on public infrastructure projects. I often field inquiries about these public infrastructure projects, and I really have the fun job in the planning department where I get to talk about the vision and the exciting new things that we might be doing. But the honest truth is that we don't do a whole lot on these public projects in the planning department. I don't have any concrete trucks in my budget or any crew members that are out here building anything. That stuff is done through often Public Works, Parks and Rec, hired contractors. We're generally supporting them on the front end in determining what the vision is, what kind of projects should we be pursuing, and also developing strategies for making them happen and pursuing funding. Often the planning department is involved in pursuing grants and then managing the monies that are involved in those grants. Many of our major projects have involved grants in recent years, and we've been able to use them effectively. Last year, we were awarded a Smart Scale grant for the East Main Streetscape that would be $2.2 million that will help to improve efficiency out on the East Main Street corridor and beautify it, as well as building a multi-use path for biking and walking that'll connect downtown out to near where the Kombucha Brewery is, and hopefully eventually connect to the Crozet Tunnel Trail. We've been involved in the South River Preserve and Low Springs Natural Area projects, attempting to construct brand new parks, and been awarded a significant amount of money from the DuPont settlement, the Mercury settlement. The planning department is currently working on a grant to put together mountain bike trails for Sunset Park when that project moves forward. We're also working on a number of greenway extensions. You all have participated in the Greenway Phase 3 discussion through the tree streets, which is going to result in more of an on-street improvement to biking and walking through the neighborhood. We also have funding in place for Greenway Phase 2B, which will extend to North Park, but still held up on a number of easements, public easements that we need to acquire. And then we have an application in this TAP cycle for money for Greenway Phase 4, which will go all the way up to Basic Park. And once all those segments are completed, we're looking at about a 4 or 5 mile trail, which I think will be a huge benefit to the city. We've also been engaged in a study with VDOT called the West Main Stars Study. You may have seen a survey that went out that's been pushed out on Facebook. And that's trying to deal with safety problems out on West Main Street, where we have a very high number of fatal and serious injury accidents, to the point where VDOT would like to address that, and we'd like to address it, and we'd like to improve that corridor, and that will hopefully turn into a smart scale study in the future, or a smart scale application. And then we also work heavily with the CDBG program to do smaller beautification projects, smaller neighborhood development and improvement projects. And we've, in the last 2 years, tried to shift towards using those funds in a more targeted way in certain neighborhoods, and that's part of how the Port Republic Road study began. The fourth way in which we advance this mission is by representing the city's interests in state and regional planning processes. We go to a lot of meetings. I do a lot of sitting in meetings and talking, and I love that. But the planning department represents the city's interests in VTrans, the Virginia State Transportation Plan, which trickles down to us through the monies that get allocated later. Our Metropolitan Planning Organization with our neighbors Stanton and Augusta. The Bright Bus Advisory Committee we're involved with, South River Watershed Protection Groups, and whatever other initiatives pop up. Some things that have gone on the regional front. We hosted this past year, and the city planning department was a supporter of and involved in the organizing committee for the first Stanton Augusta Waynesboro Walk Bike Summit, which was held at Mary Baldwin University. And there's a picture down here, and that included a number of people from around the region, and I believe Mr. Hostetter came to it, talking about ways that pedestrian accessibility could be improved throughout our region, and that plans could be coordinated between the localities. We've also participated in the newest VTrans plan and have worked on a number of changes to Bright service in recent years, including a 250 connector, which will hopefully, we're trying to pull into downtown Waynesboro so that there's fewer stops, that people that are living in the core, which is a lot of our bus users, don't have to take a bus out to Walmart and then get on the 250 connector to go to Stanton, trying to make it so that they can use a single seat. We've also changed a number of bus stop signs around town and been involved in the Afton Express studies. And we're looking forward to launching potentially a South River Watershed Summit, similar to the Bike Walk Summit, that will be focused on water quality issues in the South River, and has kind of come out of the South River Science teamwork. And then lastly, we advance this mission by building civic capacity and awareness of planning principles among citizens and future leaders. And that includes working with the Planning Commission, who are the primary advisors for City Council on planning issues, and also ensuring that we continue to put together educational materials and watch demographic trends as they develop. We did a lot of that around the comp plan. We've done a few little updates recently. You all got to see a demographic presentation while we were at the budget retreat. But our goal at the planning department is to ensure that as things change around us, that the city always is positioned to understand what's coming down the pipe several years ahead of time so that we can make the right decisions to react to those things. We also house the GIS Division. Keith Poltz is our GIS coordinator, and he maintains the city's maps and spatial data, including all our aerial imagery, our real estate information, data related to the location of city infrastructure, so that we can more effectively serve the public in formulating development projects and also in giving people access to information about real estate. Looking forward, we will continue to pursue these neighborhood plans and bring that program to a fruition, and then hopefully evaluate that and discuss whether that's something we want to continue in the future or whether it could be improved. And we'll also look to update the existing comprehensive plans. I think we're probably due soon for an update on where we're at with the comp plan, what maybe needs to, where we may have learned lessons and need to change things since then. We need to continue to make the development review process more streamlined and effective. And I think we're finding ways to do that. We've discussed community development department in the past, but we still don't have a clear plan for how that would work. And then we're also going to continue to pursue any public projects that fit Waynesboro's vision, which is a vibrant small city with direct access to outdoor adventure. And we have a number of things that have come down the pipe, I believe, that'll be exciting in that way. And as always, we want to look for more ways to work with our neighbors and citizens to create a better community. And that includes, first of all, our representatives, the citizens on city council, as well as everyone that's interested in being involved. Local government is run by the people that show up. And as the planning department, we're here ready to work with whoever shows up. So, thank you.
That's wonderful. Thanks, Lou. Any questions for Mr. Day? That was awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate you doing that. All right, number 9 is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating $440,437 for the Shenandoah Valley Animal Services Center operating budget. Mr. Hamp.
So, Mayor Short and members of council, this is largely a housekeeping issue. You may be aware that the city of Waynesboro is the fiscal agent for this regional service, and as such, it's essential that we adopt the animal shelter's budget and incorporate it into our total municipal budget. The value of that annual operating budget, $440,000, is shared among the participating localities, Stanton, Augusta County, and Waynesboro, and also reflects about $45,000 worth of grant revenue. We serve between 2,000 and 3,000 animals in a year, and that range from a few farm livestock type animals to mostly domesticated pets, dogs and cats, a few domesticated birds and snakes and rats, but largely we're in the business of dogs and cats, with a mission of supporting animal control in the participating localities and returning animals that may be lost by an owner to their rightful owners. So this is the operating budget for fiscal 20.
Thank you, Mike. Are there any questions? Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
I'll introduce.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, we'll consider this at our next regular business meeting. Number 10 is to consider introducing an ordinance appropriating a portion of the net position in the amount of $14,839 to the equipment fund to purchase a crack sealer for the streets department. Mr. Hamp.
So the fiscal 20 operating budget in the fleet fund contained approximately $152,000 for the Public Works Division to acquire equipment in support of the Streets Division. They've spent to date approximately $105,000 on a dump truck. The idea of purchasing a crack sealer is one that has been considered and planned for a number of years. The equipment cost about $60,000. This ordinance appropriates the difference between what's currently remaining in the operating budget for equipment purchases and that $60,000 price tag for the equipment. I would say that the Streets Division are anxious to acquire the equipment and use it as a pilot project with the, I would say, confident anticipation that it will improve road maintenance, which will be reflected in the OCR, the conditional report that we get through periodic assessment, and in doing so, reduce the expense of paving. So the idea would be to extend the life of certain roadways through crack sealing rather than applying a new laminate of pavement. So this is effectiveness, efficiency, and I think strategic work on the part of the Streets Division.
Thank you. Questions, Mr. Hamp? Is there a motion to introduce the ordinance?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? So, just our appreciation to staff for finding ways to stretch the dollar, so.
Will do. Thank you for your support.
Number 11 is to consider reappointing 3 individuals to the Redevelopment Housing Authority Board, each for a 4-year term ending August 31st, 2023. Mr. Hamp.
Yes, sir. So these 3 individuals are currently serving and are eligible for and willing to receive reappointment. Mr. Tom Ryder, Ms. Mary Scott Miller, and Ms. Margaret Van Huss, all terms expiring August 31 of 2023.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions? Is there a motion to accept these reappointments?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next is communication, correspondence, and calendar. Mr. Hamp.
So the only item I have is to draw the council's attention to the upcoming meetings. I'll thank our clerk, Ms. Bortle, for including those on the agenda, noting the work session that's scheduled for Wednesday, the 19th at 6 p.m., and then a second work session, March 4th at 6. Those are the only items I have.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up is citizen comment period. Grab those.
So one individual signed up this evening, Mr. Herman Wells.
And Mr. Wells, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address for the record and just remind you about our stoplight feature here.
Okay, thank you. My name is Herman Wells. I live on Magnolia Avenue in Waynesboro. I want to speak this evening with regard to an event that took place in Waynesboro last year when KKK flyers were distributed within the community. There were several meetings that took place about the flyer and other areas of concern. Some of the complaints voiced in an August 2019 meeting were the council did not speak out strongly enough about the flyer, the Port Republic Bridge project was being stalled, the Florence Avenue Bridge should be renamed to the Martin Luther King Memorial Bridge, there were crumbling sidewalks in the Port Republic Historic District, including Florence Avenue, and a street in the Port Republic area needed to be widened. I was concerned about these issues and not seeing a public statement by the city that detailed all the issues presented. I conducted my own research. My conclusions are not important, but what I believe is that when a collection of citizens addresses the council on multiple complaints about an issue such as a KKK flyer, higher taxes, crime rates, or the like, in the end, the city must publicly address the issues presented. For example, 12 citizens addressed the council on this subject. We looked into the subject. Here is what we found. Here is what we are going to do about it, or not. I know from my research the town took actions such as a resolution on hate, explaining the bridge issues, etc. And those issues were reported in different news outlets and venues, but there was not a consolidated answer to the people of this town. The citizens of Waynesboro need one place they can go so that they can see what our city believes are the facts. In the future, I would ask that you consider a consolidated statement through the use of social and local media. If the town did this, please forgive me, as I could not find a consolidated or finalized statement. The second issue has to do with naming the Florence Avenue Bridge after Dr. Martin Luther King. I believe that if we name the bridge after Dr. King, we are cheating ourselves as a city. We are not cheating ourselves with Dr. King's name. No one can deny his legacy. He is the safe bet for sure. We are cheating ourselves by not looking into the history of our own city and finding people of color who have had a profound effect on the history of Waynesboro. Believing this, I purchased a book, and on page 71 found such an example. Waynesboro native William W. Perry was educated at the Rosenwald School. After completing his graduate work, he taught at Rosenwald for 5 years, then moved away. In 1957, he returned to serve as Rosenwald's principal. According to this book, he was instrumental in getting the once unaccredited school accredited. He has been cited as the main reason the integration of city schools went as well as it did. So he bridged the divide between segregated schools. Can you imagine the leadership and determination that it must have taken? When I was a boy growing up in Georgia, my school was both bused and integrated. No one liked it, black or white. What a challenge Mr. Perry must have had before him. In my opinion, he easily deserves to have a bridge named after him, or perhaps something even grander. I'm sure there are many others. Finally, Ms. Anderson, I understand you are leaving. I want to use this opportunity to thank you for your service to the city and the community. Many citizens of our city have no idea of the sacrifice, hard work, and patience it takes to serve as a council member. I wish you the best in your future endeavors.
All right. Great, thank you so much. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Great, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.